Okay, I wanted to raise some thoughts and see what you gentlemen think about it as well, about Buddhist approach or a Dharmic approach to international relations. And there are two sutta references I want to expand on, and one kind of general observation. The first is the sutta on the great mass of suffering, Mahadukkha Kanda Sutta. I think it's in the Majjhima, where the Buddha talks in one verse about beings will put on armor, pick up sword and spear, and hack and hew at each other, leading to grievous suffering and death. And the reason for this is sensual desire, just sensual desire. So I think this can be interpreted as the Buddha giving an economic causality for war, that wars are fought for resources. It's the real, and any kind of justification that the national governments give is couched in high-minding idealism, like saving democracy or whatever it might be. But it really underneath, it's always they want land, or they want oil, or they want or perhaps they want a strategic position to defend themselves, but it's always a material, resource-based reasoning. The other sutta reference is a very short sutta where the Buddha is contemplating whether it is possible for a king to rule justly without the use of stick and sword. That is, without violence. And Mara overhears the thought in the Buddha's mind and suggests to the Buddha, well, you have supernormal powers. Why don't you turn the Himalaya mountains into gold and take over the world and use that wealth to benefit beings and rule justly without stick or sword? The Buddha says, I hear you, Mara, go away. And the curious thing to me is that sutta ends without the Buddha ever answering the question whether it's possible to rule without stick or sword.
So I think there's a real meaning to him not answering the question, because
yes, I think it's significant.
Well, what do you think it means?
I think it's probably impossible for a king to rule without stick or sword.
Yeah.
And the third point I want to make is more of a general observation. From my own study of history. My first intellectual interest was history. I have a bachelor's degree in history, and I specialized in modern European, particularly 19th century history. And one of the conclusions I drew from studying that was that nation states in their relations with each other are never moral. Moral considerations don't really apply, that they're kind of amoral actors. They like to pretend that they're being moral for the benefit of their own populations. So everybody's always presenting their side as being the good guys and the other side as being some kind of evil bad guys that have to be stomped out. But it goes back to the first point. These wars are fought primarily for resources and for territory, for land, or for mineral resources, what have you, or to in the case of, say, the case of Rome versus Carthage, to destroy a commercial rival. There's always a material cause underneath, which goes back to sensual desire. So I think as Buddhists, our primary, if we have any influence whatsoever, it should always be into the direction of encouraging peace. Any kind of warfare is going to be a violation of first precept.
Yeah. But then the Buddha himself is reluctant to speak out, his opinion on whether that's even possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've considered this a lot. It's like, you know, if you have a peaceful nation, and you know, they've disbanded their armies, you know, they have no armed forces, any such thing, then all it's going to take is just one ruthless horde of barbarians,
Yes.
and that's it. And
Yeah.
that happened to some degree in India, like when the Turks were invading, the Buddhists were pretty much just exterminated. The ones
Yeah.
that didn't run away or convert to Islam. um, the Hindus still had some martial ideals, you know, like the Mahabharata, you know, even the Bhagavad Gita, you know, it takes place on a battlefield. So they had some kind of martial heroes and some ideals of just fighting to defend themselves. But I think to some degree, it's that's one reason why the Buddha encouraged renunciation of society, is that society is just practically of necessity a messy,
Yeah.
unpleasant thing.
I agree with that. It's like samsara is always going to be imperfect. It's the nature, you know, it's the first noble truth that we're all,
Yeah,
and human society can never be perfected. You know, the best we can do is maybe have use influence to encourage more peacefulness and more harmonious relations, but it's never going to get to the point of where there's no violence and no oppression occurring.
yeah. Of course, the one famous example of a king trying to follow the Buddha's precepts and just be the dharmic ruler would be Ashoka.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he disbanded most of his armies and freed
Yeah.
most of the slaves, and even set up like free clinics for people and animals and so forth. And I think, I mean, he prospered. You know, his kingdom or empire prospered while he was alive. I think largely because people were so blown away by such a saintly king, because they were so used to the other kind.
And
But
so
his empire pretty much collapsed within a relatively short time
right.
after he passed away.
Yeah, and also he inherited from his father and grandfather almost the whole of India, and then before he converted to Buddhism, he conquered the last little corner. So he had the whole of Jambudipa under his rule. So he had no real enemies.
Oh,
Yeah, other than maybe some hill tribes or something.
but
Khyber
Panabasa,
Pass.
is your point that it fell apart with a short period of time because they weren't defending themselves enough from outside attack?
I'm not sure exactly why
Yeah.
the empire collapsed the way it did. I mean, it could have been that without Ashoka's, you know, morality, you know, his faith and conviction and so forth, that subsequent kings just you know, it just didn't work with them or something. I don't know.
I think it fell apart, if I remember, from internal dissension and revolts more than from external forces.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and then that was when the Greeks invaded, was shortly after that.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, it's like amorality. It's yeah, just you're mentioning the war of Rome and Carthage. It's yeah, the Third Punic War was just essentially just genocide.
Yeah, yeah,
And it was, I mean, Rome prospered. You know, it was that the Romans were ruthless. That early, I mean, just about any powerful nation got that way through just ruthlessness.
hmm
So, I mean, that is somewhat of a paradox. I mean, you can move to some tiny island and have set up some utopian system or some such, try to just be anonymous, just be under the radar so that nobody, you know, just be poor, I guess, so that nobody wants to steal your resources, that kind of a thing. But yeah, it is a problem. Like, so long as you've got somebody that isn't playing by the rules of morality, then I mean, you have to pretty much defend yourself or just go extinct.
yeah. It's not possible for. I mean, all Buddhist countries have standing armies. It's not possible to leave your country undefended.
And the Buddha never recommended that, right? He said you shouldn't kill, but he never recommended kings just disband your army, do not defend yourself, do not have an army. The Buddha never said that, right?
No, no.
Yeah.
There, I know that I've heard in Thailand, some of the Thai soldiers who are good Buddhists, they make the claim that they love their country so much that they're willing to sacrifice not only their life but their future life.
Yeah, that's what they're
Yeah.
doing. Yeah, we should talk about the law of karma. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I have considered something along those lines, like in a dharmic society, one more dharmic than the average. That I mean, you'd still have to have standing armies, but the soldier could be seen to some degree as a tragic hero who's sacrificing his own virtue for the sake of defending those who can't defend themselves. Something along
Yes.
those lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's complex karma.
And there have been cases historically of what would be the word, like misapplication or misinterpretation of Buddhist teachings to justify war.
Yeah, like the Japanese during World War II, for example.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one. Another one is Sri Lanka with the fighting with the Tamils, which has been like hundreds and hundreds of years on and off. You know about the Sri Lankan text, I think it's the Mahawangsa, that talks about King Dutagamani, and it's like a chronicle of Sri Lanka. And Dutagamani is a national hero of Sri Lanka because he led a great uprising to throw off the Indian, was mostly the Tamil based from India oppression of Sri Lanka. They'd conquered Sri Lanka, and he led a rebellion, freed the country, and fought many battles and wars. And in this text, it says when he was on his deathbed, he felt fearful that all the karma he'd made from killing, and an Arahant monk, apparently, as the text claims, an Arahant monk told him, of all those people you killed, only one had taken the refuges and precepts, and one had taken the refuges without the precepts. So instead of killing thousands of people, you only kill 1.5.
No.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of pushing it, I think.
That's still killing human beings.
So killing non-Buddhists, according to this text, was like no karma involved.
I thought you were going to say something like his good karma for protecting Theravada Buddhism in Sri Lanka, maybe some long-term benefit to that. So it's all very complicated, isn't it, the karma?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's karma that is mixed, right? Good that is both bright and dark, with good results and bad results.
Yeah, I think maybe the best that a ruler can do, especially in like warlike times, is just try to do more good than bad. That is sort of like in there's I think it's a sutta where somebody asked the Buddha how to dispel bad karma, and he talks about the handful of salt. If you pour a handful of salt into a cup of water, it's so salty you can't drink it. But if you pour that same handful of salt into a pond of water, then after it dissolves, you can hardly taste it at all. So just if you have to do some kind of bad actions, you just try to mix in as many good ones as possible to dilute it down.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it could be that you have to have a war, but, it may be that, your people are more healthy and prosperous and, better off because you defended them than having their cities on fire and so forth.
Right. And I think there's also degrees of karma. Like any act of killing is going to be bad karma. But if the nation is forced into a warlike situation, they have to fight, then there's going to be a lot worse karma if they kill civilians than like bombing, carpet bombing cities or massacring civilians in any way, rather than warrior against warrior.
Yeah. Yeah, I might as well throw in, there's one sutta. It demonstrates the complete uncompromising attitude towards ethics, that if you're really serious in Dhamma, and that's one of the few Jataka stories I ever read, is the Temiya Jataka, where the Buddha in a previous life is the son of a king. And one day when he's like 2 or 3 years old, he's sitting on his father's lap, and his father has some criminals brought before him, and he has them, he orders them to be executed in really nasty ways, which was the standard in those days. And then he realized, if I'm going to grow up and be the king, he was the next in succession, he was going to inherit the kingdom from his father, then I'm going to have to do that kind of a thing. So he just made up his mind he was going to pretend to be a deaf mute for the rest, and he just steadfastly pretended to be a deaf mute until his father just gave up on him in despair and had him taken out into a forest to have him just put to death. And then he started talking and converted the person that was going to kill him, and people started coming to him because he was so wise, of course. And
Wow.
pretty much everybody just renounced the world and moved off into the forest and left the city, the capital city, almost vacant
Great
as a
story.
result.
Wow. I think of karma in the big picture too. If say a virtuous country is being attacked by another country, in the big picture, you can think of karmic resultants. It could be the karmic resultants from the past, right? You think of the big picture over hundreds of years and over many centuries.
Well, I don't know. I don't really like the idea of collective karma, like a nation of people having a karma, like it's, the whole, this nation did something evil 100 years ago, and now they're going to get their karma back. I think it works on an individual level.
Yeah, although in a way you can have the semblance of collective karma just by, people would have to have a certain sort of karma to be born into a certain society, which they would, there'd be like overlap of a significant amount of overlap in their karma if they're living in the same society.
Yes, yeah, that's true. Yeah, they would have to have similar karma to be reborn in similar circumstances.
Yeah, I know karma is only individual, but at top. But if there's a massive situation with millions of people dying, I would say, wouldn't all those individuals have the individual karma that it all played out this way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I see it too, yeah. I think of the example of Ashoka, had this great kingdom, like you said, it wasn't invaded, but it falls apart. Yeah, I'm just thinking with samsara and karma, you never know how karma is going to ripen within samsara. And the Buddha is saying the average Buddha Jana is basically insane. Like samsara, you just can't be controlled, and karma ripens. So they're like, no human society can be perfect, like you're saying earlier, right?
Yeah, and consider the myth of the Chakrawata, the wheel turning monarch, which in the Buddhist tradition this is like the perfect human society. It's this king who does rule without stick or sword, benevolently, and provides largesse to the people. And the only way this works is by really supernormal means. First, he has the wheel in the sky that follows him around wherever he goes, and the other kings are so overawed by this wheel that they submit to him without battle. And then the way he gets the economy working, he doesn't have to tax anybody, which involves taxation is based on violence and oppression. You're forcing people to pay something. So he doesn't have any taxation, but he gets jewels that with the wheel, the power of the wheel, they get jewels from the bottom of the ocean. And that's the royal treasury.
Yeah, that's in your book. Do you have your book there to show the audience? The Buddhist Cosmos. I can put a link beneath this video. We should promote the book because I remember reading that in your book. That's how I learned it.
I don't know if I've got a copy here handy.
It's good. Yeah, in future videos, maybe show it to your audience because it was a lot of work. How many years did it take you to write that?
5.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like the only book of its kind really in Theravada Buddhism, the whole cosmology in one book.
Yeah, I wrote an essay on the 31 planes of existence, but that's as far as I got.
Yeah. So what else about international relations can we discuss? Like the Buddha never selected any form of government, like he talked to kings and he talked to republics, right? He never favored a particular form of government over another.
Yeah, he would talk about the morality that rulers should follow, but not any, so it doesn't matter if you got a republic or a monarchy or democracy or whatever, but if the people that are in charge should be following moral behavior. But one other point that occurs to me to make about international relations, particularly in times of war, is the value of truth. That there's an old saying, the first casualty of war is truth. And
Yes.
we see this again and again, that there's so much propaganda always flies around when there's conflict, and it becomes, it's I think as Buddhists, we should have we should value truth highly, and not, and we should have some kind of, mental immune system against propaganda.
Yes.
Yeah, I think if you don't, you're not faithful even to conventional truth, I think your hopes of ultimate truth are
Yeah, good point.
very small.
Yeah,
Yeah, and also, and just from the point of view of politics, it would be good for any nation to stick to its its treaties and that kind of a thing.
yes, yeah, that's a basic morality. If they, and there, I mean, the like I said, the nation states are pretty much amoral, but I think there has been attempts to kind of remedy that. You've got things like the Geneva Convention and the Hague Convention, and there are rules of war, and nations will sign treaties and they'll have agreements, and so I think there is some sense that it ought to be moral. But when we see the actual behavior of states in history, it tends to be really completely immoral in their relationships with each other.
Yeah, it's more philosophical and civilized, I think. And I
Yeah.
think that's, in a way, that's sort of the way that Rome was. I mean, they were fighting off Huns and Germanic tribes and so forth, and they were just as ruthless. It's just that they had a more developed system, and in a way, they had the Pax Romana, where at least they were peaceful within their own borders when they were strong.
Yeah.
At least there was that. But I would also mention, with regard to politics in the Buddha, I mean, there is a lot of emphasis on kingship, like the wheel turning monarch and so forth. But with regard to the Sangha, the Buddha did prefer a more democratic,
Yes.
consensus oriented system.
Yes.
I can't remember the name of the tribe that he emulated with regard to the Sangha. It wasn't was the Mallas or the Vajis or something. I can't remember.
I think it was the Vajians.
Okay.
Yeah, the Constitution of the Sangha. Yeah, and which is over the centuries has been kind of lost to a large degree, is because most of the Buddhist countries have been monarchies.
Yeah.
So like in a Thai monastery is pretty much an absolute monarchy, with the the top Ajahn is in charge, and
Yeah, it's the same in Burma.
I wasn't quite aware of that. Thank you. So the head monk is in charge, you're saying.
Yeah, as a Westerner, I knew that, I mean, if there's a formal act of the Sangha, the most junior monk, if he doesn't agree, then it's no go. But
yeah,
it's
but
just unthinkable in Asia.
yeah, they become sort of just like pro forma. They just kind of empty ritual. The actual constitutional basis of the Sangha is, they just become hollow rituals, really.
Oh, thanks for pointing that out. I didn't quite get that. Like I knew Ajahns had power, but how it contradicts the Buddha's Vinaya, you're saying.
Well, it doesn't, it's not an outright contradiction, but it's definitely against the spirit of it. It's definitely shifted the spirit of it, because they still follow the forms, but as Panyo says there, that they can't, the junior monk would never dare to use his constitutional power to that he has under the Vinaya to object to an act of the Sangha.
Okay, you're saying like, say in Thailand, it's been a monarchy for 1,000 years. How about in our tradition, Ajahn Chah tradition, like say with Ajahn Amro and our head office in
Yeah, but
Amaravati?
I find that with our Westerners, there's more of a consensual base.
Yeah,
Like the monasteries, the abbot is still in charge, but it's more like a constitutional monarch, and he'll, they will for big decisions, they'll have all the monks get together and discuss it.
yeah, like I like to just shout out for Ajahn Sumedho, Ajahn Amro. I feel they've been doing a great job of leading our Sangha. I mean, we're the largest organization in the world of Western Theravada monks, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
By far, probably.
Yeah, do you want to comment, Ajahn Punnadhammo, how we're doing as a real Sangha consensus democracy compared to Thailand?
Well, I wouldn't even go so far as to call it a democracy either. I mean, it's
A consensus, right?
there's still, as there should be, there's still an emphasis on hierarchy, that the senior monks are more respected, have more authority than the junior monks. But there's also a much more of a sense of things being done by consensus, and try to have a harmonious agreement on major decisions, rather than just laying down the law from on high.
Although we have a big respect for seniority, like seniority, I guess that's traditional as well. Like Ajahn Sumedho, he's been around since like 1966, so he's a senior monk, right? That matters a lot, right?
Yeah, I think that emphasis on seniority, that actually does go back to the Buddha and the original Vinaya, that to respect the elder monks. And I think that's a very skillful system, because when you have any group of, particularly men, I think maybe women's similar, but in maybe a different way. But when you have a group of men in an organization, they're going to be naturally power struggles. Who's going to be on top, who's going to be the boss.
Yeah, like Lyndon Johnson and President Kennedy.
Yeah. But the emphasis on seniority kind of takes the sting out of that, because it says, if this guy's senior to you, he's senior to you, and you can't change that.
Yeah, so it's more stable for centuries that way.
Yes.
You're right.
Yes.
Otherwise, there would naturally be coup d'etats. Some say, I'm better. I'm the younger guy. I got better ideas. I'll take over the place. And this is my idea how Buddhism should operate.
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes in Burma it does. You'll have just a more famous monk who is actually the abbot, and they'll be like old retired monks, who are kind of dimming in their faculties or something, that stay there, that just because they're senior monks, they're still sitting in back.
Oh yeah.
Behind the Sayadaw.
Oh,
But in Bunyam, it's like, I mean, there was a certain precedence, it's like the senior monk is, he walks in front and he gets first pick of the katina cloth and that sort of thing. And of course, if you're going to be the preceptor of monks, then you're pretty much their master, like their father. So, I mean, there is that, but
yeah. What sometimes happens in Thailand, if you've got a old monk who's starting to, he's gone beyond his prime, let's say, he's losing his faculties, and he's still the senior one in the monastery, he'll still sit up front and he'll be paid like deferential attention. But the second monk who's younger and still still vital, he'll be the one that's making the decisions and actually running things.
That's good in a way, right? That's good.
I was thinking more in a case of like there was Chamye Yeta in Rangoon when Chamye Sayadaw was still alive, and it was like the land was bequeathed to him, so it was like his monastery, and then like older monks would come and stay there, but still, I mean, it was his monastery, the land was donated to him, and so I mean the corporate the entity of the Sangha, the four quarters, really kind of broke down, because you had the leader who was the designated leader, no matter who else came to the monastery, who might happen to be senior to him. But in Burma, there is a lot of sort of ethnic corruption, you might call it, like the Pawarna ceremony, at the end of the rains, where you invite other monks to admonish you. And in Burma, it's almost unheard of that anyone would actually admonish another
Oh,
monk. It's just a
yeah,
formality.
yeah, that's the same in Thailand. It's just a formality. It's just recited in Pali, inviting admonition, and no one says anything. And I
Yeah.
asked 3 times, and that's it.
Well, hey,
With
you can
regard to
admonish me
politics,
if you want. Go ahead and admonish me. I'm the young kid on the block.
yeah, with regard to politics in general, I do think that Buddhism would, or the traditional Theravada especially, would just recommend that you avoid politics as much as you are able.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
if you're able to just completely renounce society, then go ahead. And like when I was in my 20s, I just lost almost all interest in politics when I finally realized that what is right and good from a political point of view is not necessarily right and good from like a dharmic point of view.
Mhm.
It's just, it's amoral. It's just sort of a law unto itself. And yeah, it's like you try to apply genuine morality or ethics to politics, and it just messes it up, and it fails because the ruthless people are going to win.
Can you
Yeah.
relate that to our topic, right? Is Dharma and like international politics, right? I guess this is what you're getting at. There's a tension there between Dharma and international politics.
Yeah. Yes. No, and I
Yeah.
go back to the Aganya Sutta, the very origin of the state it was kind of a social contract idea that people had degenerated to the point where they were starting to steal from each other, and that led to violence. So they decided, we can't have this, we've got to do something about it. So they chose one amongst them to be the king, and gave him the authority to enforce good behavior. So it's kind of like a necessary evil. Like
It makes sense, doesn't it?
if people weren't stealing from each other and misbehaving, they wouldn't need a government. If people were perfect, they could just live. If everybody kept the 5 precepts, you wouldn't need any government. You wouldn't need a state. You wouldn't need anything like that. You wouldn't need police. You wouldn't need courts.
Do you want to comment, Ajahn, on these golden ages in the past that the Buddha described, these like peaks where everyone's on the 5 precepts, lifespans go up to like 84,000 years? What sort of government did they have then, do you think?
Well, it was before. I don't know about the intermediate ones, like when after it's fell and rose again. It's not really specified. Although it is for when the next time lifespans go up to 84,000 years, there will be a wheel-turning monarch in charge. So it's again under that kind of perfect government. But at
Wow, a monarch then, a virtuous monarch.
Yeah, but at the origin, when beings started from this very high state, they fell down from the Brahma world, and the Abhisara Brahmas, and they fell down to earth, and they degenerated through several stages. So they started at a very high plane of consciousness and behavior, and immorality crept in, and they kept losing their faculties and became, shorter lived and coarser. And when they reached the point of actually attacking each other and stealing from each other, then they had to constitute a government to keep order. So it was seen like as a necessity because of the imperfect nature of man, because people weren't behaving naturally harmoniously. We need someone to keep order. And so the king has the authority. He has the danda, the stick, which the word danda literally means a stick, but it figuratively is used to mean sovereignty or authority. And you still see, like in the Canadian Parliament, the Parliament is only in session and legally binding if the mace is on the table.
Yeah.
And you have this whole ceremony when Parliament opens. These guys in 17th century outfits parade in carrying this giant mace and lay it on the table. and that means Parliament's in session. And sometimes they actually remove the mace so they can have an informal discussion. It's not binding.
Wow.
It's sort of like the Roman dignitaries that would have the fasces, you know,
Yeah,
the axe wrapped in sticks
Yeah,
carried before them.
it's the same thing. It's so sovereignty means the right to use violence.
So Ajahn, can you give a Dharmic recommendation as a senior monk? How do you recommend the use of governmental force then, in this sense, in the Dharmic sense?
I would recommend that it be as minimal as possible, and recognize that it's a necessary evil that they can't escape. You know, you couldn't the current state of society, you couldn't just disband the police, you know, which are the, you know, the enforcement arm of the government.
Or how about the jails? You can't just let everyone out of jail.
Right. I mean, obviously there'd be chaos. But on the other hand, if people were encouraged to keep morality, if people were keeping the precepts, you wouldn't need any of that.
That reminds me of our previous video on how Theravada Buddhism is not politically incorrect. In some American cities, the political correct thing to do is defund the police, right? Got to have less police, got to defund the police because that's politically correct.
How well has that worked out? You know, the closest American city to me is Minneapolis, and used to be a lovely, peaceful city, and now they've got huge, because they did that. They, you know, they put all kinds of restrictions on their police and defunded their police, and now they've got carjackings, and which they never had before.
So Theravada Buddhism is not in favor of defunding the police. So that's another way Theravada Buddhism is not politically correct to those folks.
Well, I don't know if, I mean, that's such a specific political question. It's hard to say what, you know, any kind of official Theravada position would be. Well, personally, I think it's a really foolish move, but
yeah. So essentially, you're just going to have moral inferiors taking charge of that sort of thing. Just, you know, like the punishment of the criminals and so forth. It's just, there are going to be people that aren't very dharmic, and, you know, sort of like the butchers, the village butcher, you know, he's just that's just what he does, and that you're just stuck with that. There have been attempts at sort of some attempt at like dharmic violence, and, you know, it's obviously heretical from the Theravadan point of view, but, you know, sort of like the Rinzai Zen, you know, the Bushido. There's like the story of, you know, there was this samurai swordsman, and his master was one of the greatest swordsmen in Japan. And because he was one of the greatest swordsmen, he was being challenged to duels all the time. And eventually he lost a duel and was killed. And so his disciple, you know, it was just a matter of honor for him to fight this person who had killed his master. So he searches him out and finds him and challenges him to a duel, and he's winning the duel, and he's got this guy down on his back. He's about ready to kill him, and then the guy who's lying down there spits in his face, and then he gets angry, and he's really going to finish him off now. And then he realizes, I'm no longer motivated by honor, I'm motivated by aversion and anger. So he just stands up, sheathes his sword, and walks away, because he wouldn't have killed him honorably. So something like that maybe might at least take some of the barbarism out of it. I mean, there have been, you know, even in the West, in Europe, you know, there's the ideal of the gentleman, and, you know, you got the valor and, you know, courtesy and you know, chivalry and that sort of thing. So there have been attempts to have a kind of civilized violence.
yeah,
But, yeah, I mean, it's still, from the Theravadan Buddhist point of view, I mean, it's still, you're just better off just abandoning the whole system and living in a cave somewhere.
yeah.
So that had a happy ending that no one got killed. Nothing like that though. If there was a Dharmic nation, a totally Buddhist Dharmic nation, and they had like debt-free currency for the citizens, prospered, I would think in this world, the jealousy of other nations would invade and have an excuse to destroy the nation. Like Ajahn said, it can make up some excuse if the reason is real reason is resources. So this is the tragedy. I think if you had a truly dharmic nation that was really economically prosperous, other countries would probably come in and destroy it.
Either that, or there would just be so many people flooding into the country to share in the prosperity that it would just tank the prosperity.
Right.
Yeah, just thinking this world with these international bankers and their compound interest debt currency, any country that tries, like say Libya, have the dinar, for instance, like they want to have their own currency separate from the international bankers, and they were destroyed. So I'm saying if you had a truly dharmic country, I anticipate that's what would happen. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And if, they try and Libya, and I think there was even Iraq also before the Americans invaded, that they were moving away from the international banking system. And so that goes back to it's a slightly more sophisticated variant of the wars for resources, right? It's like the Rome versus Carthage example, that merchant class wanting to protect their financial stake.
Maybe you could say, well, this is whole realm. We live on this planet, in this realm, the human realm's in this state. So there's samsara for you, right? Samsara would knock down a really virtuous country. Well, that's samsara. What can we say?
Yeah, it's probably, as the Buddha said, not possible to rule without stick or sword. It's not. It's the imperfect state of human beings.
I like what Punnadhammo said a long time ago in a previous video, that the world is basically insane. The average Buddha is just insane. So you check out of society, you go into the forest and be a monk, and you don't try to fix the world. The Buddha saying you cannot fix the world. So thank you, Punnadhammo. You said that to me about 2 years ago. It's stuck in my mind.
Yeah, all you can do is try to fix yourself, and then at least you'll have like a little bubble of better karma or something, that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
So anything else?
No, I think we've pretty well done that one.
Yeah, it was the first evening, did 3 videos in one go. So May 2nd, 2022 has been a good evening. Thank you, Ajahn, and thank you, Punnadhammo. It's been a good evening. Much better.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting discussions. Okay.